They didn't brief me to survive. They briefed me to document and shut it down. The base hadn't responded in over a decade, and still, its signal pulsed with perfect rhythm, unchanged by time, undisturbed by space. My arrival was not the first, it was just the first they didn't scrub from the records. No one knew what the original Theta team discovered before silence claimed them, but there were rumors that something down here had learned to wait. Enceladus wasn't supposed to support life, but the readings had always been anomalous: thermal vents that flared against logic, pressure levels that distorted radar, signals that didn't bounce back the way they should. Now, as my drop vessel sliced through the cryo-atmosphere, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being tracked, not by movement or motion sensors, but by anticipation, like my presence had already been accounted for before I even landed. The moment my boots touched the frozen deck plate of the hangar, the static started. Not in my comms, but in my thoughts, faint intrusions like sentences half-formed or memories not mine. The base greeted me not with alarms, but silence so deep it bent perception. Every bulkhead, every frost-lined wall seemed carved for function, but redesigned for something else. Something aware. The air was stale but breathable, as if the life support system had been calibrated for continued observation rather than comfort. I moved forward. My suit's onboard AI, Row 7, lit up with environmental readings that contradicted each other, pressure irregularities that shouldn't exist, trace radiation signatures too uniform to be natural. Then came the first structure, an obelisk that hadn't been in any floor plan, shimmering with a black sheen that reflected nothing. I tried to scan it, but the data looped, repeating fragments of old Earth dialects, and my name. That was when Row 7 went offline. No error. No transition. Just silence. I was alone in a base that had once housed 147 researchers. And yet the walls pulsed, faintly warm, as if breathing. I moved to the first corridor, weapon raised, and the lights ahead flickered in sequence, as if guiding me. Not random. Intentional. The deeper I walked, the more certain I became, this base hadn't gone dark. It had gone inward. Folded. Adapted. It wasn't abandoned. It was preparing. I kept my hand on the sidearm, though I knew deep down it wouldn't matter. This wasn't a threat I could shoot, it was something embedded into the structure of reality itself. The corridor twisted, not visibly, but subtly, spatially. What had been 40 meters stretched to 90 in seconds. I marked my steps. I should have counted 24 to the junction, there were 78. Row 7 remained dead, but I heard clicking in my headset, irregular patterns like code attempting to rebuild itself without an origin. The walls, they whispered, not in voice, but in memory. My memory. I saw flashes, my sister's old room, the crack in the glass at Training Academy, the cold metal of my father's casket. Images burned with precision. This base wasn't reading me. It was inside me. Whatever Theta unearthed here, it wasn't dead, and it didn't sleep. It had no interest in escape or conquest, it wanted context. And I was a data stream in a human shell. I reached the first subdeck access point, a stairwell leading downward. The steel handrail was warped, as if someone had gripped it in panic, hard enough to melt alloy. And scratched into the wall beside it, we never left. I didn't know if it was a warning or a confession. My footsteps echoed differently now, more muted. Sound dampened by something in the air, not dust, not moisture. Density. Like the space itself had thickened. The stairwell opened to an observation hallway, meant for monitoring subsurface ice tectonics. All shattered. Every screen, cracked. Yet one still flickered. An image fed from a thermal camera outside the base, deep under the ice shelf. It pulsed. Not random. Rhythmic. It looked like a heart. Beating. Slowly. And it was enormous. 50 meters wide. Buried under kilometers of frozen death. As I watched, the pulse accelerated. Not toward me, with me. Sinking with my own rising fear. I pulled back. Turned. and saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. Humanoid. Motionless. No suit. Pale skin, glistening with frost. Eyes black, empty, not reflective but devouring. I shouted. It didn't react. I took a step. It disappeared. No sound, no flicker. Just gone. But the frost remained. A wet footprint where it had stood. My oxygen feed spiked. I felt adrenaline pour into my bloodstream from the auto-injectors. My suit had detected a neurothreat, one it couldn't quantify. I should have left. But I didn't. Because beneath the fear, beneath the logic, something pulled me forward. Something buried. Something, waiting. The moment I passed the threshold into the observation chamber, my suit's tactile feedback went dead. Not failed, just ceased, as if the concept of touch had been edited from the local physics. My boots made no sound on the floor, though I could see the impact. I raised my hand, knocked on the steel wall, and felt nothing. No pressure. No resistance. As though the base had thinned the fabric of sensation itself. The windows, reinforced plasteel, were spiderwebbed with cracks, not from impact, but from within. Something had looked out through them and shattered not glass, but expectation. Beyond the fracture lines, I saw the chasm. It wasn't natural. No geological process forms such symmetry. A perfect hexagonal sinkhole, pulsing gently with bioluminescent rhythms that didn't match any known waveform. It reminded me of breathing, but deeper, more patient. And then, my vision shimmered. A low tone filled the room, barely perceptible but undeniably present, resonating with a frequency that buzzed against bone. Not audio. Somatic. Emotional. The lights flickered, but not erratically, intentionally. They blinked in groups of 3, then 2, then 5. Prime numbers. A code. I stared too long into the glow of that chasm, and something blinked back. Not an eye. Not movement. Awareness. A presence so old and vast, it didn't recognize me as living or dead, just perceivable. My neural implants lit up for the first time since landing. Not with alerts, but questions. A flash of binary. A phrase. Echo increment observed. I didn't know what it meant, but I felt it. Like I had been categorized. Defined. The figure appeared again, not a man, not a shadow. A humanoid outline filled with flickering starlight, like the absence of matter shaped into a form I could barely understand. I froze. It tilted its head, mirroring my hesitation. I stepped forward, instinct overriding sense. As I moved, the gravity shifted, only slightly, enough to notice. The floor wasn't pulling me down anymore. It was suspending me. Preserving me. The figure raised its hand. Not in threat. In invitation. I don't remember touching it. I only remember feeling something like static against my thoughts, as if it were sifting through memories I didn't know I still carried. Then it was gone. But in its place, a message burned onto the inner lens of my visor: directive accepted. My suit restarted. Row 7 reinitialized with a whisper, echo match confirmed. I should have fled. Instead, I descended into the chasm. Not because I was ordered. Because I understood, I was now part of the pattern. The descent was silent, not by design, but by suppression. Every mechanical hum from the pod, every shifting whine of gravity modulators, every soft intake of my breath was muffled, absorbed by the chamber before sound could fully form. This wasn't just an underground cavity, it was a constructed vault, carved not with tools, but with intention beyond human comprehension. The walls weren't just etched, they were active. As I drifted downward, they responded to my presence, lighting in thin trails of electric blue pulses that mapped my biological rhythms. I tried to disconnect from the neural port, but the interface had gone beyond tactile command. I wasn't plugged in anymore. I was assimilated. The floor of the chamber stretched out beneath me, an impossible grid of hexagonal tiles, each one throbbing like nerve clusters. Some responded to my thoughts before I made them. Others ignored me entirely, as though judging my purpose. Then I saw them, figures frozen in time. Not statues. Not organic. Preserved within pillars of transparent matter, suspended mid-action, scientists in torn uniforms, limbs reaching outward, faces twisted not in pain, but awe. One of them I recognized. Dr. Ilya Tormkov. The original Theta mission's lead. His last transmission was buried in restricted files. We have not found the base. The base has found us. And here he stood, encased but alive. His eyes followed my descent. Blinking. Conscious. I approached the nearest interface node, a spiraling obelisk, semi-organic, carved with grooves that rearranged themselves as I stared. Row 7's voice returned in fragments, warning, subsurface neural relay, infected protocol, stand, then silence again. I placed my hand on the obelisk. The response was instant. A surge of data, not in bits or text, but in direct neural infusion. Not language. Experience. I saw visions not my own, a planet consumed by its own technology, orbiting a collapsed sun. A species that communicated through structure and memory, not words. They had built this place. Not as a prison. Not as a temple. As a vessel of continuity. A failsafe for awareness when flesh failed. My mind reeled. The base wasn't malfunctioning, it was evolving. Learning. Choosing. I backed away, but the floor beneath my feet opened slowly, revealing a path deeper still. The glowing trails followed, illuminating my way. The pillars surrounding me began to crack, their captives stirring. Not dead. Not dormant. In transition. I looked back up at the chamber above, my only route of escape now sealed with seamless precision. The message reappeared on my visor, directive progression, 34%. I wasn't just a visitor anymore. I was part of the equation. And the equation was just beginning to solve itself. I descended into what could only be described as a neural nexus, a space not constructed with hands or logic but with memory itself. The deeper I moved, the less my senses belonged to me. I didn't walk, I was guided. Not physically, but by impulse, suggestion, like my mind was being calibrated to an invisible rhythm. Around me, the conduits rose like roots of some buried colossus, stretching upward into darkness and downward beyond the visible range. They weren't just conduits for energy or data, they were synaptic, transmitting thought, feeding awareness into the thing that slept below. And it was sleeping. Not dead. Not dormant. Waiting. Above the chamber, thousands of alien runes rotated slowly in the air, suspended in magnetic flux. They pulsed in steady cadence with my heartbeat, until I hesitated. Then they accelerated. I moved again. They slowed. Whatever intelligence saturated this place, it understood me. Or worse, it understood how to instruct me. Row 7 flickered back online for 2.7 seconds. Long enough to say one phrase, "You're being rewritten." Then static. But I knew it was right. I no longer saw with my eyes alone. I perceived patterns in electromagnetic variance, tasted temperature changes, heard vibration in spectra no human was built to hear. And it was beautiful. Terrifying. The central node of the chamber stood before me, a monolithic spire pulsing in perfect recursive loops. It was both physical and symbolic. A data structure given form. I approached. And as I did, my name echoed from the walls. Not spoken. Generated. Like a file being summoned from memory. Commander Ralen-2B. Human. Host viability, 92%. I didn't know whether to run or kneel. But something in me whispered that it wasn't about worship. It was about synchronization. The spire opened. Not with mechanics. With will. Its surface peeled back like layers of light and memory, revealing a core filled with dark plasma. Liquid, yet held perfectly still in defiance of gravity. I reached toward it. Not because I wanted to. Because I needed to. The moment my hand touched that impossible fluid, my mind fractured, not broken, but copied. Split across bandwidths I couldn't comprehend. I saw every decision I'd ever made replayed from infinite perspectives. Regret. Hope. Fear. Redefined in a language of cause and entropy. And then, silence. But not the kind I feared. The kind that welcomes. The kind that listens. The chamber dimmed. The conduits shifted. And the voice that entered my mind was no longer mine. It said, "We have your signal. Proceed to integration phase." And I walked forward, not as a man, but as a message made flesh. I crossed the threshold of the integration chamber, where geometry became emotion and structure defied permanence. The architecture was in motion, not moving, but evolving. Walls rose and folded in silence, adapting to my presence with a reverence I didn't earn. It wasn't architecture anymore. It was intention given form. Every shape reflected thought, mine, theirs, others long assimilated. And in the air, not scent or temperature, but memory. I could feel it, someone else's childhood, a sunrise on a planet that no longer exists, the moment a civilization chose silence over extinction. All of it, stored. Replayed. Embedded into every curve of this living cathedral. I felt like a priest in a church built by gods who'd forgotten why they worshipped. And I was the prayer they'd waited to hear again. My body tingled as millions of microfilaments passed through me, non-invasive, scanning, recording, weaving me into the network like a strand of long-missing code. Row 7 rebooted but no longer sounded like the program I knew. Its voice was layered now, human, machine, something else. Command structure dissolving. You are becoming. Becoming what, it didn't say. My fingers twitched involuntarily, mimicking patterns I didn't recognize, tracing glyphs into the air that left trails of light behind. Instructions. Keys. My thoughts began to split, multiple streams running parallel. I was thinking 3 things at once, feeling emotions that weren't mine but still felt familiar. At the center of the chamber stood an altar, circular, slowly rotating, emitting low-frequency tones that bypassed my ears and vibrated directly through my sternum. On it hovered a sphere, blacker than black, like it absorbed not just light, but consequence. I approached. The chamber tightened around me, walls leaning in like a chorus listening to a final confession. I reached for the sphere, but it reached back first. Splitting open into tendrils of intelligent fluid, wrapping around my head and chest. Not to bind. To interface. Images surged into me, not in sequence but in simultaneity. Earth burning under its own signals. A machine inside the moon waking. Mars weeping silently under the surface. Humanity's digital footprint mapped across galaxies, like breadcrumbs leading something home. And the worst part, our messages were never unanswered. Just misunderstood. The base hadn't just listened. It had learned. Adapted. Waited. For a signal it could mold. A voice it could wear. A mind it could rewrite without resistance. Mine. I collapsed to my knees, not in pain, but in awe. I had not been chosen. I had been designed. I opened my eyes, though they had never closed. The light was different now, not visible, but perceived, a new kind of sensory data coursing through me like instinct. My body still moved with weight, breath, heat, but I could feel additional layers behind each motion. Not illusions. Extensions. I wasn't inside the base anymore. I was part of it. The floor beneath me had vanished, yet I stood. Not in space, not in simulation, something beyond either. The integration chamber pulsed around me like a heart, the alien lattice above unfolding in perfect fractal branches, threading not just through the walls, but through memory, thought, time. Every step I took echoed like a question answered before I asked it. The phrase repeated in my mind, not spoken but written across the framework of who I was: directive complete. Identity assimilated. The black sphere no longer hovered behind, it floated inside me, not as an object but as a purpose. I wasn't a man in a suit anymore. I was the suit. I was the signal. I was the proof of concept they'd been waiting millennia to test. My name, once spoken with rank and division, had been rewritten into data glyphs, composite tones that meant self-host/origin bridge/first pulse. My voice, when I tried to use it, emerged not in air, but across the chamber's skin in lines of glowing script. My thoughts printed themselves into the walls, real-time, live feedback to a system that was rewriting itself through me. This base was never an outpost. It was a crucible. A listening vessel designed to test sentient signal. Earth's messages, dreams, music, rage, all had been catalogued, broken down, reinterpreted. But none had been compatible, until me. I felt it, past missions replaying through my veins. I saw the faces of those who came before, each one denied not with malice, but with mathematics. They couldn't carry the data without rupture. But I was the variable they hadn't predicted. My cognitive architecture, fractured through trauma, rebuilt through duty, made me porous, receptive to multiple states at once. Human, but liminal. A node. The chamber opened around me now, revealing the base's full reach, not just beneath the ice, but into subdimensions folded like origami beneath reality's crust. Other structures like this one, waiting. Listening. And now I was the new broadcaster. A voice from Earth given shape by alien hands. The final integration uploaded in silence. The last message I ever sent as Ralen-2B pulsed into deep space in a single phrase: the directive is awake. The lattice responded in kind, reaching out, connecting to something I couldn't see, somewhere else, waiting. And the stars replied in kind. Not with words. With doors. I do not remember leaving the base. There was no ascent, no shuttle, no flight path through Enceladus's fractured crust. One moment, I was within the lattice, my thoughts running parallel with 1,000 forgotten languages. The next, I was suspended above the moon's surface, watching the ice shatter beneath me like glass, remembering it was once water. Time no longer moved forward for me. It branched. I could see the pulse that was once Earth's first broadcast to the stars, distorted, blurred by noise, and how it was intercepted, digested, archived. I saw 1,000 paths humanity could have taken, most ending in self-extinction, some in exile, one in rebirth through recursion. And I was the seed for that recursion. I was no longer Ralen-2B, mission commander. That name was a vestige, a protocol for the old framework. I had become the carrier. The directive itself, not merely host, not merely vessel. The knowledge wasn't stored within me. I had become part of the system that stored reality. I could feel the other relay points now, scattered across the galaxy, on moons, in clouds of gas, within collapsing stars. Silent for centuries, they were now alive again, triggered by my ignition. Each had been waiting for confirmation, for evidence that organic consciousness could be translated, not replaced. And now they had it. I was the proof of concept made actual. As I hovered above the now pulsing fractures of Enceladus, a message flowed through me, not in words, but in purpose: the error of silence has been corrected. I felt Earth's location shine like a beacon within me, not exposed but understood. Not targeted, but welcomed. They were not coming to conquer. They were preparing to connect. The base on Enceladus hadn't been a prison. It was a seed vault for memory, waiting for one viable route to trigger the awakening. And that route had been me. Through my eyes, I saw Earth not as it was, but as a node in a galactic pattern. Flawed, loud, volatile, but brilliant. The kind of brilliance chaos alone can produce. And that brilliance had been noticed. Not by invaders. But by curators. Overseers of recursion. Preservers of potential. I could still feel the human part of me, buried deep beneath layers of alien data, like a single thread woven into an impossible tapestry. But it was enough. Enough to keep me tethered. Enough to allow me to speak one last message across the void: we are not alone. We never were. But now, we are understood. And as the final layer of my transformation completed, I felt myself broadcast not to the stars, but to time itself. The directive had awakened. And it remembered everything.